What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Should have two videos out today for you guys. Another one out maybe in 3 or 4 hours in which I talk about Daniel Jeremiah's first mock draft and talk about the players that he had the New York Giants selecting. I know it's way too early to start talking about the draft, especially for a team like the Giants, because right now we don't know definitively who our head coach is. We don't know who our offensive coordinator is. We don't know who our defensive coordinator is. So we don't even know what the philosophy of this team is going to be going into the draft. But regardless, it's still fun to talk about and learn some of the prospects that the New York Giants may be looking at come draft time. So I'll have a video out on that. I think Daniel Jeremiah is one of the best when it comes to mocks, so it'll be fun to go over the guys that he had the New York Giants selecting at 5 and 7. But in this video, we're going to talk about the news that came out today about Brian Daboll. And if you watch my previous videos, and I don't think it takes a rocket scientist, I believe that Daboll in the end will be the New York Giants head coach, and I think he is by far the odds-on favorite right now to land that job. That doesn't mean he'll get it. We'll have to wait and see. There's no guarantees, but I do think he'll get this job. And in this video, we're going to dive into what I feel are some of the pros and cons of Brian Daboll. Let's start off by saying this. There is no exact science when it comes to hiring a head coach. There are several teams that go the route of hiring a head coach that had done it before, and a lot of times it works, and a lot of times it doesn't. You look at Mike McCarthy. Even though the Cowboys had a 12-5 year, Cowboys fans can't wait to get him out of there, and it's been rumored that they may be looking to fire him. You look at Ron Rivera of the Washington football team. Yes, I understand they had injuries this year, but he hasn't really exceeded expectations, and he may be looking for another job in a year or two. Who knows? You look at Gruden. Yes, I know he had issues off the field this year, but he wasn't really succeeding either with his first 3 or 4 years there with the Raiders. So sometimes it works with refurbs, sometimes it doesn't. Same thing with new head coaches. Sometimes you get McVay, sometimes you get Joe Judge. So what is perceived to be a con about Brian Daboll, and I think it's fair, is the fact that he has no experience in terms of being a head coach. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a con. He's an offensive coordinator. He's an unknown. Now, I understand why New York Giants fans are reluctant to hire a guy like this, or at least some fans, due to the fact that we've done this in the past. We did it with Pat Shermer. We did it with McAdoo. Both guys that were thought to be really good offensive coordinators that came to the Giants and failed miserably. But you can't be scared to hire the guy that you think is the best guy to take this job. And I think right now, if you ask me, Joe Schoen probably feels like Brian Daboll's his man. And we'll talk about some of the strengths that he could bring to the table for the New York Giants. First, let's pull up this tweet in which it came out from Tom Pelissero that the Giants are now bringing Daboll in for a second interview. Of course, the Buffalo Bills lost last night, and maybe we'll receive word that they're hiring Daboll within a couple of days. We'll have to wait and see. To me, that was one of the greatest football games I've ever watched. A lot of people on Twitter I saw were like knocking Brian Daboll's play calling. I don't know. It looked like the Buffalo Bills were putting up a ton of points to me. Now, of course, having Josh Allen as your quarterback certainly helps, and I think that's the other question that a lot of New York Giants fans are asking themselves. Is it more Daboll or is it more Josh Allen? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to be able to watch Josh Allen and to say to yourself, he's one of the 2 or 3 most talented quarterbacks in the sport. However, we all know that Josh Allen was a project, and we all know that Josh Allen started off slow, and Daboll's been there since his upbringing. Well, he was with Wyoming. He ran a completely different offense than what he did when he came to the Buffalo Bills. I read an article, I think, from PFF. I didn't pull up these quotes. I pulled up others in which they talked about how I think he only had like 5 or 6 RPO plays his entire tenure there with Wyoming while he was there in college. When he was with Buffalo when he first started out, that was a big part of their offense. So he had to adjust to the NFL. And Daboll, after year 2, started to readjust the playbook and try to get the most out of Josh Allen's strengths. And a lot of Giants fans look at that and they say, well, why can't we try to do that for Daniel Jones or potentially the quarterback that replaces Daniel Jones? And obviously right now we look at this Giants team. We've ranked 31st each of the last 2 years in offense. If you combine the last 2 years, we've been dead last. In addition to that, I think Josh Allen under Daboll's tutelage has been one of, if not the best, red zone quarterback in the NFL. I think I remember reading a stat this past year that he threw his first red zone interception of his career this year, his 4th season in the NFL. This coming out from Pelissero. The Giants plan to interview Bills offense coordinator Brian Daboll a second time for the head coaching job today per source. Daboll is the first known finalist for New York, which is also interviewing Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn today, heating up. And of course, Dan Quinn was the first guy we received word on that the Giants were going to be interviewing. Pretty sure that's his first interview. Daboll is already on his second. So it sounds like Schoen is really accelerating the process. Now let's jump into his resume. This is Brian Daboll's resume. We're going to skip over William and Mary. We're going to skip over Michigan State. Went to the New England Patriots in 2000 and 2001 to be a defensive assistant. Then became a wide receivers coach in 2002 to 2006. This is actually, I believe, where he first met Nick Saban, which is going to come into, relevancy as we go along the timeline. He later worked for Alabama, and that's what got him the job with the Buffalo Bills. He did a great job there with Tua Tagovailoa, which is why the Miami Dolphins are hot on the pursuit of Brian Daboll as well, because they look at that and they say, well, maybe he could get the most out of our quarterback. So he's a guy that right now is in high demand for a head coaching opportunity. Became the quarterbacks coach for the New York Jets in 2007 to 2008. I believe old Chad Pennington was the quarterback there. Then became the offensive coordinator for the Browns for 2 years from 9 to 10, was an offensive coordinator for the Dolphins for just 1 year in 2011, the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs for just 1 year in 2012, then went back to the Patriots as a tight ends coach from 13 to 16. Found out that he couldn't really move up the pecking order there because of Josh McDaniels, went back with Nick Saban for 1 year at Alabama, and he impressed so much that the Buffalo Bills gave him a job to tutor Josh Allen from the start. I believe he was the guy that actually convinced Saban to put Tua Tagovailoa in the national championship game, if I'm not mistaken, and he was widely credited with that. And obviously did a really good job. Now, when you look at this list, a lot of people are going to look at it and they're going to say, well, why did he only have 1 year here and 1 year there with all these previous other destinations? And listen, I'm not a fan of those teams. I don't watch it. But what I will say is when you look at what he had to work with, I mean, look at some of the quarterbacks that this guy had to work with at his prior stops. But, well, that's a great credit to Daboll when talking about Josh Allen. Is it a defining one or just a matter of being in the right place at the right time? With all due respect to his fine work with Allen, Daboll's NFL resume was undistinguished prior to that. I think he means to say Chad Pennington. It says Chad Harrington with the Jets, Brady Quinn, Derek Anderson, and Colt McCoy with the Browns, Matt Moore with the Dolphins, and Matt Castle and Quinn with the Chiefs. And you look at that list and you say to yourself, well, what did the guy really have to work with? I mean, Matt Castle was basically a career backup who only got an opportunity with the Patriots due to the fact that Brady went down with an injury and then the Chiefs threw a little bit of money at him, and he's probably the best quarterback on that list. Brady Quinn was a complete bust out of Notre Dame. Pennington was solid with the New York Jets. Wasn't even the OC there, though. He was the quarterback's coach. Derek Anderson, I think he had 1 or 2 good years with the Browns. Matt Moore. I mean, you're talking about the bottom of the barrel. So he really didn't have much to work with, and that's probably why he didn't succeed at those prior destinations. At the end of the day, you need talent on the field. Make no mistake about it. Brian Daboll looks a lot better because he has Josh Allen. The question is, how much better does Josh Allen have because he has Brian Daboll? At the end of the day, you need talent, but you also need coaches that could get the most out of those players' potential, and I think a lot of people feel that Brian Daboll was able to do that. These are Josh Allen's stats while he's been in the league in the NFL. Like I said, started off really poorly, like we all remember. Was a project coming out of Wyoming. They were trying to get him acclimated to a new offense when he came into the NFL. He had a 68 QB rating, 10 touchdowns, 12 picks. His rookie year with only a 53% completion percentage. The next year they made the playoffs. He had 20 touchdowns, 9 picks, and 85 QB rating, but still only a 59% completion percentage. And I remember after that year, I did a video, and you go back and watch it, where I predicted that Josh Allen was going to be the breakout quarterback because over his last 8 games that year, I think he only threw 2 picks, and he showed that he was starting to show progression. The following year, they completely changed the playbook. They got Stephon Diggs in there, and you saw him take off. Last year was his breakout season in which he threw for over 4,500 yards, 37 touchdowns, and 10 picks with a 107 QB rating. This past year, his stats actually went down a bit, but I think we all saw what he was capable of in the playoffs, in which he almost had a perfect QB rating in the 2 games combined. He had a 149 QB rating in the 2 games combined against the Kansas City Chiefs and the New England Patriots. And last night, I felt like I was watching a video game. He threw 9 touchdowns and 0 picks over the 2 games, and Daboll calling the plays. This, talking about some of the players that play for the Buffalo Bills, talking about Brian Daboll's offensive philosophy. When asked how often Daboll will change plays late in the game week, Stephon Diggs answered quickly, every day and twice on game day, he said with a smirk. He harps on it all week. He says we have smart players that can handle it. And we all say, yeah, Dabes, we're smart, but it's a lot of information. It is a give and take relationship. He trusts us out there, and you know Josh is pretty smart as well. He'll figure it out and move all the pieces in the right spot. When you do have smart players, especially at your quarterback position, you're never really too concerned because they'll figure it out. And that's basically Stephon Diggs saying, Yeah, he's a guy that trusts his players. He's a guy that's going to change the game plan on a daily basis, but it certainly helps that he has a very smart and talented quarterback in Josh Allen. This thing coming out as well. That leaves Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills on its face. What Buffalo is doing couldn't be more opposite from what Allen operated within during his time at Wyoming. This was in a PFF article talking about the transition to the NFL with Daboll and Allen. Offensive coordinator Brian Daboll was called up from Alabama to lead Allen's development as a quarterback, fresh off a national championship season that required building an offense around a raw quarterback. The two came into Orchard Park as a package deal in 18, and the trajectory they've been on is evidence not just of success, but of adjustment in philosophy and scheme to maximize a franchise-altering talent. I know Brian really well, and I respect him a ton, said former NFL front office executive for the Chiefs, Falcons, and Patriots, Scott Pioli. Of course, Pioli was a guy that a lot of people felt that the Giants may bring in for the GM search. He knows offense to the core. He comes from a family of coaching that's founded in discipline, detail, and the basics and fundamentals of the game. Brian was also in a lot of places where there was an emphasis put on accentuating the positive and limiting the negatives. He knows that their best football player is Josh Allen, and everything has to try to be centered around him and his strengths. So there you go. That's what Pioli had to say regarding him. Then this. That creativity is rooted in relentless pursuit of anything that's fresh and inventive. His players often joke that Dabes, as they call him, has never seen a play that he's roundly dismissed. Always open to any kind of play concept, Daboll will listen to any idea a player or coach might have. It is his willingness to be collaborative that has often kept Buffalo's offensive play caller ahead of defensive coordinators seeking to neutralize his weekly game plans. I think he just continues to find ways to explore different types of plays, said Josh Allen. He's constantly watching film from college, other NFL games, and even sometimes high school games. He's got a knack for it, just finding good play calls. He'll switch things up where teams maybe lose focus on one guy and then bring him in or focus too much on another guy. He continues just to watch a lot of film, and he's a very open mind for different plays from everybody on the team. It doesn't matter what position you play, he's willing to take a look at it. So, obviously, I like hearing that. It sounds like a coach who wants to work with his players. It sounds like a coach that tries to get the most out of his players and he's able to adjust. He's not a guy that just has this scheme and you have to fit to it. He's going to try to fit his scheme around the players that are on the roster. But it goes back to the roster. You still need the players to be able to get the most out of the scheme, and we'll see if Daboll does in fact become the New York Giants head coach, because I would have to think he'd be the play caller, being that is clearly his strength. He can get the most out of Daniel Jones and the other players on this New York Giants roster. Got to fix the line regardless, or you're not going to be able to maximize the potential of your quarterback and the playmakers. Listen, we've gone down this route, like I said at the top of the video. Pat Shurmur, you could, if I was on YouTube at the time during the coaching search, I would have been saying the same thing. Pat Shurmur coming in from the Minnesota Vikings came off a great year of an offensive coordinator. He had 3 quarterbacks that he got career years out of before he became the New York Giants head coach. Nick Foles under Pat Shurmur, the 3rd highest QB rating still to date in a single season with the Philadelphia Eagles, okay? And he brought Case Keenum to an NFC title game, which is inevitably why he got the New York Giants job. I think the reason why the Giants brought in Shurmur is the same reason, more than likely, why they'd be bringing in Daboll. They brought in Shurmur to try to help Eli Manning late in his career and knew that they'd be drafting a quarterback shortly thereafter, and they wanted a good offensive mind to be able to show him the ropes and get his career on the right track. And you may be seeing the same thing with Brian Daboll, whether it be with the young quarterback Daniel Jones or the quarterback that may replace him, whether it be this draft or the draft after that. But I think the Giants see that they need an offensive mind. At the end of the day, this team has been near bottom of the barrel in offense over the last 2 seasons. And when you look at the coaches that the Giants brought in, I don't really see a whole lot of competition in terms of an offensive mind that could potentially be the head coach of this football team. And you tie in the fact his ties to Joe Schoen, I think it makes Daboll the clear-cut favorite. Are there cons? Absolutely. There's going to be cons with any candidate that you bring in. There's no exact science to this, much like the quarterback position. You're throwing darts at a board. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the way that the Buffalo Bills have operated over the last 5 years, I think it's worth a shot. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.